Good evening, you're watching AWANI Tonight with me, Saraya Mia. Muar MP Syed Saddiq Syed Abdul Rahman has been found guilty of all corruption charges over misappropriation of funds under Armada, the youth wing of Bersatu. He has been sentenced to 7 years jail, fined 10 million ringgit and 2 strokes of the cane. The High Court here has allowed Syed Saddiq's application to stay the execution of his sentence while pending appeal.
I respect the decision of the High Court and the High Court judge. And with that respect comes a sense of consistency in defending the institusi kehakiman or the institution of justice. And I'm not here to lambast, condemn or disrepute the institution of justice, because in the end I'm like any other Malaysian and should be judged like any other Malaysian.
A total of 30 prosecution witnesses testified in the trial, which began on June 21st, 2022. On October 28th last year, Syed Saddiq was ordered to enter his defence after the prosecution established a prima facie case against him. He was charged with abetting former Armada Assistant Treasurer Rafiq Hakim Razali, who was entrusted 1 million ringgit of Armada funds to commit a criminal breach of trust by misappropriating funds. The former Youth and Sports Minister was also accused of misappropriating 120,000 ringgit from Armada and 2 counts of money laundering.
Syed Saddiq has stepped down as party president of the Malaysian United Democratic Alliance Muda. He said he will not be involved in any of the party's decision-making processes from now on, with Muda Deputy President Amira Aisha Abdul Aziz taking over his duties temporarily.
But in terms of holding the office of presidency, after the decision was delivered in the High Court just now, I no longer deserve the role, because that role requires someone who's whiter than white. And with that, I think Amira Aisha and the leadership will decide on the next step forward for Parti Muda.
Saddiq said he would remain as a member of the party and will still hold the position of Muar Member of Parliament. Earlier, Dewan Rakyat Speaker Tan Sri Johari Abdul assured that the former Youth and Sports Minister will get to keep his seat in Parliament until he has exhausted all legal avenues. Meanwhile, Communications and Digital Minister Fahmi Fadil urged the public to make an appeal if their social media posting was taken down by mistake. He said removed content does not just revolve around race, religion, royalty or 3R issues, but also content deemed inappropriate based on the Communications and Multimedia Act.
Sesiapa yang ada menerima kandungannya terkesan dengan cara ini boleh memohon dengan pihak MCMC dan juga dengan platform media tersebut. Ya, sekiranya platform media dan pihak MCMC meneliti semula dan selepas itu diputuskan dikembalikan, maka dikembalikan. Tidak menjadi masalah. Ya, boleh dibuat rayuan.
Fahmi said the public should be aware that social media platforms usually have their own set of guidelines as well. Separately, Fahmi said any efforts to amend the Communications and Multimedia Act 1998 had to be done holistically. He said the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, MCMC, is in discussions over the amendments, though it has not yet decided on the next course of action.
Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim has reminded the Kuala Lumpur City Hall DBKL to not delay approvals of development projects in the nation's capital. He has also given DBKL 2 weeks to submit a report on the progress of the 2040 Kuala Lumpur Structure Plan's implementation.
Kerana kritik itu kita harus terima dengan baik. Jangan rasa tersinggung. Memang benar ada kelewatan. Saya di New York 2 bulan lalu bertemu dengan beberapa syarikat-syarikat besar. Dan bila saya tanya, dia kata memang dari faktor-faktor yang positif banyak. Tapi dia kata walaupun kita ini cepat kelulusannya berbanding dengan beberapa negara lain di Afrika dan Latin Amerika dan Asia, tapi mesti kalah, masih kalah dengan beberapa negara seperti Vietnam. dari segi the pace ataupun tahap kelulusan dan kecepatan kelulusan.
Anwar, who is also the finance minister, said any delays in the KLSP 2040 implementation would impact the public as well as investor confidence. KLSP 2040, which will guide the development of Kuala Lumpur over the next 20 years, replaces the previous plan that was published in 2004. The government is also working on the proposed Freedom of Information Act in Malaysia. Law and Institutional Reform Minister Datuk Sri Azalina Osman Syed says the government has agreed to amend the Official Secrets Act 1972 or Act 88 to ensure that it complements with the new law.
The proposed Freedom of Information Act would allow any individual to access information from any ministry, department or agency through submitted requests, while amendments to Act 88 aims at improving public service delivery and providing more transparent access to government information. Azalina said the Prime Minister's Department's Legal Affairs Division is now in the process of identifying parameters, challenges in implementation and any conflicting legislation. In September, Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim announced that the Special Cabinet Committee on National Governance had agreed in principle to enact the Freedom of Information Act.
Over 61,000 officers and personnel from various government agencies are geared up to face the northeast monsoon. According to Special Functions Minister Dato' Armizan Muhammad Ali, the National Disaster Management Agency NADMA will ensure all its branches are prepared to handle any potential disaster that may occur during the period.
NADMA's National Disaster Command Centre (NDCC) has started operating 24 hours a day and has informed telcos to immediately issue warnings via SMS and targeted flash broadcasts if floodings occur. The northeast monsoon season would begin on November 11th and last until March next year. 4 to 6 episodes of continuous heavy rainfall that may result in flooding are expected to occur throughout the country, particularly in Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang, Johor and Western Sarawak.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay tuned.
PM mengumumkan yuran pendaftaran Universiti Awam dihadkan tak lebih daripada RM1,500.
Kes kemasukan ke hospital meningkat 2 kali ganda akibat jerbu.
Dan difahamkan sekurang-kurangnya 8 wartawan terbunuh dan 2 lagi hilang dalam serangan udara Israel ke atas Gaza.
Welcome back. An estimated 50,000 people have fled northern Gaza as Israeli ground forces advance deeper into Gaza City. The Israeli military claimed to have taken over a Hamas stronghold in northern Gaza after a 10-hour battle. Nearly 50,000 Palestinians are sheltering in Al-Shifa Hospital. Despite recent evacuation orders from Israel, many are staying put because they have nowhere else to go. 1 month into the conflict, the death toll in Gaza has risen to 10,700, including more than 4,300 children. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, speaking at the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Japan, said Israel should not reoccupy Gaza, adding, however, that Israel might control the territory for a transition period. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed that there will be no ceasefire in Gaza until all hostages are released, while Hamas says hostages will not be released until a ceasefire is agreed. Gaza faces an increased risk of diseases spreading as Israeli bombardment disrupts the health system, access to clean water, and causes overcrowding in shelters. The World Health Organization has warned that as the number of deaths and injuries in Gaza continues to rise, so too does the rapid spread of infectious diseases. The WHO said that the lack of fuel had caused desalination plants to shut down, increasing the risk of bacterial infections such as diarrhea spreading. It added that more than 33,000 cases of diarrhea had been reported since mid-October, most of them in children under 5. The number of children affected marked a significant increase compared to an average of 2,000 cases monthly in the age group in 2021 and 2022. WHO said the lack of fuel has also disrupted collection of solid waste, creating an environment conducive to the rapid and widespread proliferation of insects and rodents that can carry and spread diseases. It added that it was almost impossible for health facilities to maintain basic infection prevention measures, increasing risk of infection caused by trauma, surgery, and childbirth. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has said that both Israel and Hamas have committed war crimes in the conflict that erupted just over a month ago. Volker Turk also reiterated the call for an urgent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas during a visit to the Rafah crossing in Egypt.
The atrocities perpetrated by Palestinian armed groups on the 7th of October were heinous. They were war crimes, as is the continued holding of hostages. The collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians is also a war crime, as is unlawful, forcible evacuation of civilians.
Australia's government launched an investigation into a nationwide telecommunications outage that affected around 40% of the country's population. Communications Minister Michelle Rowland says the post-incident review would focus on understanding how the network failure at telco provider Optus occurred.
She said a separate investigation conducted by the government's communications regulator would assess whether Optus failed its obligations to carry phone calls made to emergency services. Over 10 million Australians under the country's second largest phone provider were hit by the 12-hour network blackout on Wednesday. The unexplained glitch crashed electronic payments, disrupted emergency services phone lines, and prevented access to government systems. Optus has repeatedly apologized for what it described as a technical network outage, but has not provided a more detailed explanation of the root cause.
In other news, Hollywood actors have reached a tentative deal with major studios to end a strike that has lasted for 118 days. Actors union SAG-AFTRA says its negotiating committee unanimously backed the deal with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers.
The 3-year deal, worth more than $1 billion, includes increases in minimum wages and a new bonus paid by streaming services. It would also provide safeguards against unauthorized use of images generated by artificial intelligence, an area of major concern for performers. The walkout, combined with a separate writer's strike, has delayed the releases of many films, including 2 Marvel titles. The combination of both strikes is estimated to have cost the California economy more than $6.5 billion so far. While the actors' strike ended at midnight, the union said more details would be released following a meeting on Friday.
The president of military-ruled Myanmar, Myint Sui, says the country is at risk of breaking apart due to its inability to address the recent violence in its border regions with China. The Myanmar junta is facing a surge in attacks by pro-democracy and ethnic minority insurgents on several junta bases, the biggest challenge to its authority since it seized power in 2021. Ethnic insurgent armies in the northern Shan state, supported by other armed groups opposing the government, have overrun dozens of military posts and captured border trade towns with China. The government has responded with airstrikes and artillery bombardments, forcing thousands of people to leave their homes. But it has been unable to bring in reinforcements or recover the ground it has lost. The offensive poses a serious test for the junta since they seized power from the elected government in February 2021. It marks the first time that the wall-armed insurgents in Shan State have explicitly aligned themselves in their military operations with the wider campaign to overthrow the junta and restore democratic rule. That wraps up AWANI Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Soraya Mia and we'll see you soon.